Good morning, traders. It's Friday, the final push into the week. We're seeing oil surge on geopolitics, gold catching bids ahead of key inflation data, and rotation creeping under the surface as yields and currency flows wobble. Then, today, we'll walk through the overnight signals, recap the tape this week, deep dive macro levers, map where flows want to go, and lock in 3 trade setups ready for the open. So, let's jump straight into it then, traders. Firstly, talking about futures and overnight pulse. Futures, the Nasdaq up around 1%. The Dow sitting up, also green, around 0.3%. And lastly, the S&P 500 up almost 0.6%. So green across the board there, only the VIX losing down 1%. Asia and Europe is mixed. Oil and energy names are higher, tech is steady, and some defensive spid. Dollar and rates. The dollar is a touch firmer ahead of US CPI. Long yield steady and slightly higher. Steady to slightly higher. Commodities, oil jumped up around 5% after new sanctions were announced. Gold's rebounding. So essentially the open could tilt directionally, either a breakout into strength or rotation into safety. Bias remains tactical and the news will play a big part. So let's talk about the tape recap this week. What it taught us? Well, firstly, midweek saw gold drop more than 5%, profit taking after its record run. Energy and commodities got a lift late in the week on geopolitical supply shock headlines, and tech and growth have held up, but breadth remains narrow. Not all sectors are participating. Thus, our lesson is that strength is selective, traders. The broad market isn't charging. Trades need structure and confirmation, like we say every single day. Not just structure, not just confirmation, we need both. Our macro levers: geopolitical and supply risk. Oil surged sharply on new sanctions tied to Russia and Ukraine. That flows into energy, materials, and also forces yields and currency responses. Secondly, gold and safe haven demand, driving the news today again. So, after a sharp run and pullback, gold's rebound shows hedging flows remain relevant. Next, inflation data looming. US CPI on deck. If inflation surprises hot, yields and dollar could pop and growth could wobble. Rotation underneath, with gold and oil both active. Capital is probing cyclicals, with commodity minus levered names, but only if the data backs it. Thus, our key takeaway is the market is at a fork. Either growth re-accelerates or rotation into safety takes over. Alright then, rotation and flow map. Energy and materials. With oil up sharply, cyclical names and oil miners can catch flow. If breadth improves here, trend strength grows. Tech, semis, and AI are still the heart of risk appetite. If tech holds and breadth joins, trend is intact. If tech weakens, rotation picks up. Defensive, staples, and healthcare. If growth wobbles or inflation risk spikes, these will lead the fallback. And lastly, our breadth signal. If small and mid caps and cyclicals join early, we get trend. If they don't, expect narrow strength and rotate mode. Okay, traders, that's it for our rotation and flow map, as well as the macro levers. So let's jump into trading view and take a look at some trade setups going into Monday. The first one we're going to take a look at is Chevron, ticker symbol CVX. This is our energy or supply shock play. And why, you ask? Well, as oil jumped 5% on sanctions, energy names may lead if supply concerns hold. Action. Long if CVX opens green, holds above pre-market high, and energy sector is firm. And stop or exit if oil reverses or XLE turns red. Scale trail on gains, traders. Secondly, let's take a look at ASML Holdings, ticker symbol ASML. This is our semi-infrastructure anchor. Why? Well, while semis may wobble, infrastructure names like ASML often get overlooked. Strength if supply chain optimism returns. Action long on clean green open with ASML above VWAP and SMH or supply chain peers supportive. Stop or exit below opening range low or early retest fail. Scale partials early. Alright, thirdly and lastly is Johnson & Johnson, ticker symbol JNJ. And it's our defensive anchor with optional upside. Why? Well, if growth risk shows up and breadth narrows, defensive names with stable cash flow like J&J get bid. Action, long if J&J opens green and XLV confirms. Add if early retest holds. Stop or exit. Sector fade with VWAP loss. Scale profits moderately. Alright traders, let's wrap it up. Our execution filters and tape cues. Firstly, as always, futures versus VWAP. First ESNQ VWAP test. If it holds, then press. If it fails, then tighten. Breadth by 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Broad participation means higher trend odds. Narrow means rotation or chop. Liquidity magnets, opening range high-low, prior day high-low, and pre-market pivots. Lastly, volume is greater than opinion always. If volume lacks, treat moves as suspect until confirmed. Alright then traders, let's wrap it up for today. Our final call going into Friday and the weekend. We're watching oil, inflation data, gold, and rotation flows. As for the trade setups, I've got CVX for energy momentum, ASML for semi-infrastructure, and J&J for defensive ballast. Trade what prints, not what you hope. Let's be patient and respect structure and stops. So then traders, thank you for taking the time to watch this video once again. I hope you found it helpful. I will create a market wrap-up video over the weekend and going into the open on Monday. So I'll see you then. Take care and all the best.